I always thought people only said dramatic things before a breakup in movies, not in real life. But the night Madison sat across from me at our small apartment dining table, the one we bought secondhand when we first moved in together, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Caleb, I think I've lost myself." Her voice was soft, trembling like she hated the words, but somehow had practiced them. T first, I didn't panic. People say stuff like that all the time when they're overwhelmed. Jobs get stressful. Life gets heavy. People drift. It happens. But what shook me wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't say after. She didn't reach for my hand. She didn't say, "I need you." She didn't even cry. She just stared at me with this strange distance in her eyes, like she was looking at someone she barely recognized. I tried to joke it off. "Lose yourself? Babe, you're right here. I've literally never seen you miss a single detail in your whole life. Double quotes, nothing. No smile. No comeback. Just a sigh as she looked down at the table. Then she added the line that would split my world in half. I need space to figure out who I really am. It hit harder than I expected, because for the last 3 years, Madison and I had done everything together. We moved states together. We worked crappy jobs together. We dreamed about buying a house one day, nothing fancy, just something with a yard big enough for a goofy dog. We had plans. So hearing her say she needed to find herself felt like someone quietly erasing all those plans with a single stroke, but I didn't want to be dramatic. I didn't want to make her feel guilty. So I nodded, thinking space meant breathing room, not a breakup. I didn't push. I didn't question. I just told her I was there for whatever she needed, if only I knew what she really meant, because the signs had been there for weeks. Tiny cracks I ignored because I trusted her. She had started guarding her phone like it contained state secrets. She turned it face down every time a notification buzzed. She'd walk to the bedroom to take certain calls. She started working late even though she never mentioned any major project. I chalked it all up to stress, because Madison was Madison, loyal, predictable, steady. But the girl sitting across from me that night wasn't steady. She wasn't calm. She wasn't even nervous. She was disconnected, like she had already left, like this conversation was just a formality. Still, I didn't panic. I told myself relationships go through phases. People drift, but they also come back. Love isn't supposed to fall apart this quietly. But when she said she needed space, she didn't ask if I was okay with it. She didn't say how long. She didn't explain what kind of space. She just announced it, like a decision already made. And yet this is the part that still makes me sick. I blamed myself. Maybe I'd been too busy. Maybe I wasn't affectionate enough. Maybe I didn't listen enough. Maybe I was the reason she was lost. That night she slept beside me, but it felt like a stranger was in my bed. She turned away from me. She didn't reach for me. Her breathing felt heavier than usual, like she was holding in an ocean of secrets. Around a.m., I woke up and saw the glow of her phone under the blanket. She was texting someone. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask who, because love makes you blind. Yes, but sometimes love makes you choose blindness. The next morning, she left early. She didn't kiss me goodbye like usual, didn't say love you, see you tonight, just grabbed her bag and walked out. My gut twisted, but I told myself she was overwhelmed. Nothing more. Hours passed, then a day, then 2. She barely texted, barely called, and when she did, her messages felt sanitized. I'm okay. Just thinking. Need a little more time. Nothing intimate, nothing personal, nothing Madison. Until one night, the night everything changed, when she finally said, "Caleb, I think we should take a break." The words shattered something inside me, but the worst part, she sounded relieved, as if she had been waiting to finally say it. As if the lost version of herself had already been found, just not with me. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't imagine in my worst thoughts, was that Madison hadn't lost herself at all. She had given herself fully, willingly to someone else, and the space she needed wasn't for finding clarity. It was for hiding betrayal, but all of that, the truth, the gut punch, the unraveling that would come later. For now, all I had was confusion, denial, and the sinking feeling that the girl I loved was slipping through my fingers, while pretending she was just finding herself. I spent the first few days of our break convincing myself it wasn't as bad as it felt. Breaks happen. Couples take time. People reevaluate. It doesn't always mean the end, but deep down, something cold and heavy settled in my chest, a feeling I didn't want to name yet. Because every time I asked Madison what a break meant, she dodged the question like it was an attack. I just need space, Caleb. Please don't pressure me. I'm figuring things out. Figuring what out? Our relationship? Her future? Herself? Or someone else? The more she avoided clarity, the more helpless I felt, like I was just floating in place while she drifted farther and farther away. The shift in her behavior wasn't subtle. Before all this, Madison used to check in with me constantly, send memes, call during lunch, FaceTime before bed. Now, hours, sometimes entire days, silence. When she did text back, her replies were stiff and short, like she was talking to a coworker, not the man she'd shared a home with. Hope you're well. I'm still thinking. I just need a little more time. Not babe, not Caleb, not even love you. I tried not to overthink it, but love makes you hopeful long after logic has left the room. Meanwhile, our apartment felt different, empty in a way I'd never felt before. Her shoes weren't by the door, her jacket wasn't draped over the couch like usual, the mug she always used for her morning tea sat clean and untouched in the cabinet. You don't realize how much someone fills a room until they're gone, and all you're left with is the ghost of their routine. Her friends stopped talking to me too. That's when I knew things were worse than she was admitting. Ashley, her closest friend, practically a sister, had always been bluntly honest with me. She'd tease me, roast me, joke with me, but in moments of truth, she never sugarcoated anything. So when she stopped replying or gave one-word answers after hours, I don't know. Ask her. She's going through a lot. Something wasn't right. Ashley wasn't cold. Ashley wasn't distant. Madison was hiding something, and her friend was helping her hide it. That hurt more than I expected, because I wasn't just losing a girlfriend. I was losing an entire support system I thought I was part of. The nights were the worst. You'd think sleeping alone gives you space to reset. It doesn't. Every night felt heavier, quieter, longer. I'd roll over and reach for someone who wasn't there, out of muscle memory, out of longing, out of denial. And every time I touched the cold sheets, it hit me like a fresh cut. She wasn't here. She wasn't thinking about me. She wasn't missing me. But I missed her so much it felt physical, like someone had tied a weight around my ribs. Then came the first crack in her story. It was a Wednesday night when she sent a message that didn't match the excuses she'd been giving. She wrote, "I'm really overwhelmed at work." I stayed late again, but earlier purely by accident. I'd seen her location shared through an old group app we both forgot we were still in. She wasn't at work, she was across town, at a part of the city she never went to, near the riverfront, where the nightlife sits, small bars, restaurants, and lofts. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was meeting a friend. Maybe she needed air. Maybe she went there to think. But the sinking feeling told me otherwise. Still, I didn't bring it up because I was terrified of the answer, and that silent fear was the true beginning of my helplessness. I started becoming someone I didn't recognize, checking my phone every minute, staring at her social media, reading old messages over and over like they could tell me what changed, going through every memory trying to spot where things went wrong. Love shouldn't turn you into a detective, but love mixed with uncertainty does, especially when your heart knows the truth before your brain allows it. Her excuses kept piling up. Her new pattern was too obvious. Late nights, no calls, minimal replies, needing space, not ready to talk. Still finding myself, she didn't even try to personalize them anymore. She was just throwing vague lines at me like a script she memorized, and I absorbed them because I didn't want to push her away. I didn't want to be the reason she ran, even though she was already running. The first time we met during the break, it crushed me. After days of silence, she agreed to meet at a cafe. I dressed like it mattered, like if I looked like the man she fell in love with, maybe she'd see something she forgot. But when she walked in, she didn't hug me, didn't smile, didn't even soften. She sat across from me like we were old acquaintances catching up out of obligation. Her eyes didn't light up. Her hands didn't reach across the table like they always did. I asked if she was okay. She said, "I'm just figuring stuff out." I asked if we were okay. She said, "I don't know yet." And then I saw it. Her phone lit up beside her. She flipped it over so fast it was almost a reflex, and the lock screen, just a glimpse, showed a notification preview with a name I didn't recognize. Evan. I didn't react. I didn't ask, but my stomach dropped so hard I felt nauseous. That name kept looping in my head for days. Evan, Evan, Evan. Who the hell was Evan? But the worst moment of helplessness came a few days later. I was scrolling through social media when I noticed something strange. Madison had archived, not deleted, archived most of our pictures, all the couple posts, all the anniversary shots, all the vacations, all the tiny moments we thought were special enough to save. Gone. Like she was preparing for a different life. A life where I didn't exist. A life she wasn't including me in. I called her. She didn't answer. I texted her, nothing. Hours later, she replied, please don't make this harder than it already is. Harder on who? Her? She was the one leaving. She was the one pulling away. She was the one hiding something. But somehow, she made me feel like the burden. Helplessness is not just fear. It is powerlessness. It is silence. It is waiting for someone else to decide if your heart matters. And Madison was deciding slowly, quietly, ruthlessly, without saying the truth out loud. But deep down, I already knew she hadn't lost herself. She had given herself away. The weight of that realization pressed on me like an anchor in the middle of a stormy sea. I couldn't change her choices. I couldn't rewind the moments or fix what was breaking between us. All I could do was sit with it, my chest tight, my mind racing, and wait to see the full truth, the truth that was quietly unraveling, piece by piece. Behind her carefully crafted smile, the helplessness wasn't just in losing her. It was in knowing that she was already somewhere else in her heart, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The first undeniable crack in Madison's story appeared like a shadow slipping across the floor, subtle, quiet, but impossible to ignore. I had spent days spinning my mind in circles, rationalizing her distance, telling myself she needed space, that I was overthinking. But reality has a way of showing up whether you're ready or not. It was a Thursday evening. The sky was bruised purple, the kind of sunset that makes you pause, thinking about everything at once. I had been scrolling through social media, hoping to see anything that reassured me, but every picture, every post, every story made my chest tighten. Madison's profile was active, her posts carefully curated, but there was a story she hadn't planned to hide. A tagged post caught my eye. Madison was at a new restaurant downtown, laughing, leaning against a man I didn't know. The way she smiled, the way his hand rested lightly on her shoulder, it wasn't innocent. My stomach dropped. My hands trembled. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence, that maybe he was a cousin, a friend, someone harmless. But the subtle intimacy, the comfort in the way she looked at him, told me otherwise. I felt an urge to call her immediately, demand answers, tear through the fragile veil of excuses she had woven around herself. But something held me back, a quiet, desperate voice in my head warning me that this confrontation, if I chose it, would change everything. And maybe, deep down, I already knew what I would find. The next day, I tried to speak to her casually, asking about her evening, pretending I hadn't seen the post. Madison smiled, a practiced, soft smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "Oh, just hanging out with some friends." It was nice. Nice? I knew that tone, the tone people use when they're covering up, when the truth would be worse than the lie. I wanted to push further, but the words lodged in my throat. I wanted to scream, to demand, to tear open the reality I feared, but I couldn't. I felt trapped, helpless, and utterly alone. Her avoidance wasn't limited to casual conversation. Every time I tried to discuss us, she twisted the topic, redirected the blame, or spoke in abstractions. "I need to focus on myself," she said. "I'm confused about who I am." Yet each time, her schedule subtly shifted, each outing and late-night absence painting a picture I wasn't meant to see. It was as though she had orchestrated a shadow life parallel to ours, and I was just beginning to glimpse its outline. If you find this story good, please like and subscribe our channel. It's free for you, but helps us a lot to keep sharing real stories like this. The next blow came from someone unexpected. Madison's younger brother, Liam, had always been shy, quiet, and protective of his sister. He called me one evening, hesitant, almost apologetic. "Caleb, I think you need to know what's going on." My heart raced, a mixture of hope and dread. He hesitated, then continued, "She's been seeing someone else. I didn't want to tell you. I didn't know how." The world fell out from under me in that moment. Hearing it from someone else, someone I trusted, made the betrayal tangible. It wasn't a distant suspicion anymore. It was real. Madison's words, her pleas for space, her self-described need to find herself, all of it had been a mask for something else entirely. Someone else entirely. I remember feeling frozen. My hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My mind was a storm of questions, accusations, and disbelief. How could she do this? How could she look me in the eyes and ask for space when she was already living a life with someone else in her heart? Was I that easy to replace? That easy to forget? The helplessness wasn't just emotional. It was physical. My chest ached, my stomach churned, and for the first time, I truly understood what it meant to feel powerless in a relationship. I spent the next few days piecing together her subtle hints, the inconsistencies in her story, and the patterns that had been there all along. Every time she worked late, every vague explanation, every story that didn't quite match up, it all formed a trail. The trail led to someone new, someone she had chosen over me while telling me she needed to find herself. And that knowledge, searing as it was, did nothing to change the helplessness that had taken hold of me. If anything, it intensified it. I couldn't make her see the truth. I couldn't make her choose differently. I couldn't even convince myself that there was any way back to what we had been the night I finally saw them together, not in photos, not on social media, but in real life. I realized the depth of the distance between us. Madison was at a small downtown cafe, laughing with the man I now knew as Evan. The scene was mundane, ordinary even. Yet it was a knife twisting in my chest. They were not hiding. They were comfortable. They were already moving forward while I was still trapped in disbelief. I sat in my car across the street, watching, feeling the helplessness settle deeper into my bones. Every laugh, every smile, every casual touch was confirmation of a life I was no longer part of. And yet, I couldn't leave. I didn't want to confront her there. I didn't want to create a scene. All I could do was sit and watch, powerless, aching, and heartbroken. Helplessness, I learned that night, isn't just about being unable to stop someone else's actions. It's about being trapped inside your own emotions, watching the person you love choose another path while you remain paralyzed by disbelief and longing. It's realizing that the person you thought you knew, the person you trusted, the person you gave your heart to is no longer yours. And there's nothing you can do about it. And so I sat there, long after Madison and Evan had left the cafe, alone in my car, with the city lights blurring against my windshield, and felt the full weight of it. Not anger, not relief, not even confusion, just helplessness. The helplessness of loving someone who had already given themselves away. The first piece of undeniable evidence came in a way I never expected. I had spent days spiraling through my own thoughts, replaying every conversation, every moment, every laugh we'd shared, trying to find the cracks I'd missed. And yet, the truth had a way of revealing itself quietly, almost cruelly, in plain sight. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had decided to finally confront my own feelings by revisiting Madison's apartment, the place that had once felt like home, now a gallery of absence. Her coat still hung in the closet, though it had been untouched for days. Her toothbrush sat untouched in the cup. Small traces of her existence remained, frozen in time. Reminders of a life I was being slowly erased from. As I scrolled through messages I'd ignored for weeks, old chats, emails, and shared notes, I found it. A trail I couldn't deny. A conversation between Madison and Evan that left no room for misinterpretation. Casual words on the surface, but beneath them, a pattern of secrecy, affection, and planning that had been happening while I was blind to it. Can't wait to see you tonight. One message read, "Me too. Last night was perfect," replied Madison. Perfect? Last night? I sat frozen, heart pounding, as I realized this had been happening while she claimed to need space to find herself. Every carefully constructed excuse had been a veil, a smokescreen hiding something I was never supposed to see. But that was just the beginning. I started looking closer, retracing her movements, connecting the dots that had been scattered across days and weeks. Every work excuse, every late night, every sudden plan to meet friends aligned with Evan's presence in the city. She hadn't been lost at all. She had been living another life, in parallel, and I had been blind. The shock was suffocating. I felt my stomach turn, my chest tighten, my hands shake. I tried to breathe, tried to convince myself this couldn't be true. But the evidence didn't lie. It was all there, meticulously hidden, yet staring me in the face. I remembered the weekend prior when she had supposedly gone to visit a friend in a nearby town. A text from Evan, time-stamped just hours later, proved she had never left the city. Every word, every lie, every fabricated excuse collapsed under the weight of a single undeniable truth. She had chosen someone else. I realized then that I had to see it with my own eyes. I had to confirm that this wasn't just a misunderstanding, that I wasn't imagining the betrayal that had been gnawing at me for days. So I followed the trail quietly, cautiously, like a detective tracing a suspect's path. The cafe where they met, the little art gallery downtown, even the small bookstore she claimed she'd been at alone. Every location fit the pattern. Madison wasn't searching for herself. She was building a life with someone else, and she had done it with such precision that I hadn't noticed the early signs. It was at the bookstore that I saw them together for the first time, completely unaware that I was there. Evan's arm rested lightly on her shoulder. She laughed at something he said, tilting her head toward him in a way that made my stomach lurch. Their comfort with each other, the ease in their gestures, the familiarity, all of it confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. Madison had not only emotionally left me, but she had already emotionally arrived somewhere else. And yet, I couldn't turn away. I couldn't leave. Something in me needed to see it to confirm the reality I had been avoiding. Love, or the remnants of it, had trapped me. I felt powerless, unable to interfere, unable to change anything. All I could do was observe a silent witness to the life she had chosen without me. After they left the bookstore, I stayed behind, sifting through my own emotions. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak. But beneath it all was a strange clarity. The puzzle pieces, once scattered and confusing, now formed a clear picture. Madison had never lost herself. She had consciously stepped into someone else's arms while asking me to give her space. Every word, every excuse, every pause had been part of a script she had written carefully to protect herself while hiding the truth. The realization left me numb. I walked home slowly, retracing my steps, thinking about the life I had envisioned with her, the apartment, the future, the laughter, the late-night conversations. All of it now felt like it had belonged to someone else's story, someone else's life. The helplessness I had felt before was still there, but now it was accompanied by a burning need to understand how she could do this so quietly, so intentionally. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every promise, every moment of laughter and love. Each memory now carried a twinge of betrayal. The more I analyzed, the more signs I noticed, small inconsistencies I had previously dismissed. Her sudden preoccupation with work, her new routines, the selective silence with her friends. All of it pointed to a pattern I had been too blinded by love to see. It wasn't just infidelity. It was the orchestration of a parallel life while I remained unsuspecting. Madison's actions had consequences beyond the betrayal of trust. They were an erasure of the relationship we had built together, a meticulous rewriting of our shared story, and yet there was no immediate confrontation. I couldn't bring myself to call her, to accuse, to demand answers. The helplessness was suffocating. I was trapped in the knowledge of her duplicity, unable to act, unable to reclaim what had been stolen. My heart ached with a quiet, relentless pain. For the first time, I understood the depth of emotional betrayal, not the physical act itself, but the deliberate deception, the lies carefully interwoven with truth to create a believable facade. Madison hadn't lost herself. She had found someone else, and she had made sure I would never see it coming. I sat in the dark, the weight of understanding pressing down on me. Every shared memory, every promise, every laugh now carried a sting, and in that silence, I knew that nothing would ever feel the same again. My heart had been quietly rewritten without my knowledge. The discovery didn't bring closure. It brought clarity. The truth was undeniable, and yet it came with the realization that clarity alone could not fix the damage. The helplessness persisted, now sharpened by awareness. I had seen the evidence. I had witnessed her with him, and I knew that the life we had shared had ended long before I had been willing to admit it. In that moment, I resolved to hold on to the truth, no matter how painful. Because even though I couldn't stop what had happened, even though I felt powerless, I needed to face reality. And that reality was stark, brutal, and inescapable. Madison had chosen Evan while telling me she was lost. The ache in my chest was relentless. But amidst the devastation, one thought became clear. I had to rebuild my understanding of love, trust, and self-respect from the ruins she had left behind. The weight of helplessness was starting to shift, slowly, almost imperceptibly, into something sharper, something that demanded attention. I couldn't ignore the truth any longer, couldn't let Madison's secrecy continue to dictate my emotions. But knowing was not enough. I had to act, and action required clarity, patience, and evidence. I started retracing every moment, every interaction that had seemed off before, now illuminated in stark detail. There was the evening she had said she was working late at the publishing house, yet a mutual friend mentioned seeing her downtown at a small jazz bar. There was the weekend she claimed she was visiting her cousin in New Jersey, but Instagram stories tagged her on the west side of the city. Each small inconsistency, once subtle, now became a thread I could follow, a map that led directly to the truth I had been avoiding. I kept my distance, observing quietly. I didn't want confrontation yet. I didn't want the chance for her to hide, to twist her story, to rewrite the narrative in her favor. I needed undeniable proof. My heart ached with the duality of hope and dread. Hope that maybe I was wrong, that there was an innocent explanation. Dread that every hint I had ignored until now would be confirmed. Then came the night that changed everything. I was walking past a quiet little bistro she had mentioned wanting to check out weeks ago. It was late, the streetlights casting elongated shadows across the sidewalks. I saw her through the window, laughing softly at something a man said. A man I didn't know. He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers in a gesture that spoke of intimacy and comfort. Madison didn't see me, didn't even glance in my direction. She was completely unaware that someone she once loved was standing outside, watching Heartbreak. I felt my chest tighten. It was almost unbearable to see her, not just with someone else, but with someone she had chosen while claiming to find herself. The helplessness I had carried for weeks intensified, but now it was accompanied by a quiet, simmering determination. I had to know everything, not just the fleeting glimpses, but the full story of what had been hidden from me. Over the next few days, I became methodical. I started piecing together her interactions, following social media clues, verifying locations, and quietly asking friends about her whereabouts. Each answer confirmed my fears, but also strengthened my resolve. Madison had not lost herself. She had deliberately stepped into someone else's life, and she had done it without a trace, without a hint that she was leaving me behind emotionally. I remembered the nights I had lain awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying our past conversations, searching for signs I had missed. Every casual comment, every fleeting expression of doubt she had voiced, now I could see them clearly, colored with the knowledge I had gathered. I realized how skillfully she had orchestrated her double life, how carefully she had masked the truth while maintaining the illusion of distance for self-discovery. The pain of understanding this was sharp and immediate, but alongside it grew a quiet, steady anger, not blind rage, but a controlled, focused clarity. I couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the betrayal, but I could prepare myself for the inevitable confrontation. I would not be caught off guard again. I would face the truth with the evidence in hand, and I would demand the clarity I deserved. One evening, I revisited our old apartment, the place that had once been our sanctuary. Her things were still scattered, as they had been left, the remnants of a shared life that now felt like a relic of a different story. I picked up small items, a book she had been reading, a mug she always drank from, and let memories wash over me. Each object was a reminder of intimacy and trust now fractured by deception. I realized that my anger, my heartbreak, and even my helplessness had a purpose. They were guiding me toward action, teaching me the boundaries of what I would tolerate, and showing me the clarity I needed before confronting Madison. I couldn't allow emotions alone to dictate my response. I needed strategy, focus, and above all, undeniable proof. The next day, I carefully collected the evidence I had been gathering. Screenshots of messages, timestamps of social media posts, location tags, and confirmations from friends, all pieces of a puzzle I would soon lay bare. I arranged them meticulously, chronologically, ensuring there could be no dispute. The betrayal was not just emotional. It was documented, tangible, undeniable. Even as I compiled the proof, I felt a strange mix of grief and empowerment. Grief for the love I had lost, for the trust that had been shattered, and for the life I had imagined with Madison. Empowerment because finally, for the first time in weeks, I felt in control. I was no longer a passive observer in the unraveling story of our relationship. I was preparing to face it head-on, to confront reality with evidence that could not be ignored. I knew that when the time came to confront her, it would not be easy. There would be tears, anger, and denial. There would be moments when I might question myself, moments when I might wish I had been wrong. But I also knew that I had to face it. For closure, for truth, for the right to reclaim my life and my dignity from the deception that had clouded our relationship. That night, I sat alone in the apartment, evidence spread before me, reflecting on the weeks that had brought me here. The helplessness, the confusion, the quiet despair, all of it had prepared me for this moment. I would confront Madison, not with rage, not with accusation, but with clarity, facts, and the undeniable truth of her betrayal. The ache in my chest remained, but it was now accompanied by a steady resolve. The next chapter of this story, one that would demand honesty, confrontation, and reckoning, was approaching, and I was ready to face it. The day of confrontation arrived with a heaviness I couldn't shake. It wasn't just a meeting. It was the culmination of weeks of uncertainty, suspicion, and quiet agony. I had spent every spare moment preparing evidence organized, thoughts rehearsed, emotions braced. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, closure, and reclaiming the narrative that Madison had quietly rewritten without me. I asked her to meet at a neutral location, a small, private cafe downtown where no one else would be present. She arrived, as always, composed and calm, her smile warm but cautious. The very sight of her, the familiar way she tucked her hair behind her ear, sent a pang through me, a reminder of everything we had shared. But there was no time for nostalgia. I had come to face the truth, not to relive the past. I slid the first phone across the table, the screen displaying the messages I had meticulously gathered. I didn't speak at first, letting her read. Her eyes widened slightly. the corners of her lips tightening. A subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but enough to confirm that she understood exactly what she was seeing. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Madison," I said finally, my voice steady though my heart raced. "I've seen everything, the messages, the photos, the timestamps. I know about Evan. I know about the nights you told me you needed space while you were with him. I need the truth now." She inhaled slowly, her eyes flicking to mine, searching, perhaps for a hint of softness, a chance to plead, a loophole to slip through. But I didn't offer one. I had spent weeks gathering clarity, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate the narrative anymore. "Caleb," she started, voice tentative, almost fragile. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I was confused. I needed to find myself. I felt a pang of the old tenderness, but it didn't sway me. Finding yourself doesn't mean building a secret life with someone else while pretending to be lost," I said, each word deliberate. "It doesn't mean lying to me, planning your absence, rewriting our story without telling me." Her hands trembled slightly on the table. I noticed the subtle bite of her lip, the tension in her shoulders. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry before the reality hit me again. Every carefully constructed excuse, every tear she might have shed, couldn't undo the betrayal she had orchestrated so methodically. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "But you did," I said, voice firm. "You hurt me in a way that words can't fix. You made choices that erased the trust we built, that replaced it with lies. And now, we need to confront the consequences of those choices." The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to taste. Her usual composure wavered, her eyes darting nervously to the table, the floor, anything that might anchor her in this uncomfortable truth. She was no longer the person I had known, the person who had once shared dreams, laughter, and intimate nights with me. She was someone else entirely, someone whose actions had fundamentally altered our reality. "I didn't plan to fall for him like this," she said finally, voice cracking. "It just happened. I didn't want to deceive you, but you did," I replied gently, yet firmly. "You made choices every day that led to this. Every lie, every absence, every carefully constructed alibi, those were all conscious decisions. You weren't lost. You were building a parallel life while leaving me behind emotionally." She looked away, and for a moment, I thought the confrontation might end with silence, with a quiet acknowledgement of guilt. But then she spoke, more urgently, almost pleading. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to ruin everything we had. I care about you, Caleb, but I needed to explore myself with him." Her words hung in the air like smoke. I could feel the sting, but I also felt a strange calm settle over me. I had prepared for this. I had seen it all, collected it all, understood it all. Nothing she said now could change the truth I had uncovered or the clarity I had gained. "I care about the truth more than your excuses," I said, my voice steady. "And the truth is, you've made your choice. I need to make mine. This ends here, Madison. I can't be part of a story where I'm not fully included, where trust is optional." Her face paled, and for a brief moment, I saw regret, perhaps even fear. But it was too late. The evidence, the reality, the heartbreak, all of it had already spoken. My decision wasn't born out of anger or revenge. It was born from the understanding that I deserved honesty, loyalty, and respect, things she had voluntarily given to someone else. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of unspoken words filling the space. Outside, the city moved obliviously, unaware of the private reckoning happening in that small cafe. Madison's hands rested on the table, trembling slightly, while I maintained my composure, steady, resolute. Finally, she looked at me, eyes glistening. I'm sorry," she whispered, almost too quietly to hear. I nodded, accepting her apology not as reconciliation, but as acknowledgement. "I understand," I said, "but understanding doesn't mean forgiving. Not yet, at least. Right now, it's about accepting what's real and moving forward with clarity. If you find this story good, please like and subscribe our channel. It's free for you, but helps us a lot to keep sharing real stories like this." The confrontation ended without dramatic shouting, without accusations flying, without physical tension. It was quieter, sharper, and more painful, the kind of confrontation that leaves marks on the soul rather than on the surface. Madison got up, adjusted her coat, and left the cafe without another word. I stayed behind for a moment, staring at the table where the evidence still lay, feeling a strange mixture of relief, grief, and liberation. The confrontation had been necessary, unavoidable, and it had confirmed everything I already knew. I had faced the betrayal, seen it fully, and had spoken my truth in return. For the first time in weeks, I felt a measure of control return. I had been passive for too long, letting uncertainty and helplessness dictate my emotions. Now, I had confronted reality head-on. I had faced the person I loved and the choices she had made. And though my heart ached, I also felt the first spark of something else: freedom. The confrontation was not the end, but it was the turning point. The lies had been laid bare, the betrayal fully revealed. And the path forward, though painful and uncertain, was mine to walk with honesty, dignity, and self-respect. I left the cafe that evening feeling heavier than before, yet lighter in another way. The confrontation had taken courage, and I had mustered it. I had seen the truth, presented the truth, and refused to let deception dictate my life any longer. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The confrontation had changed everything, but it was only the beginning. Madison's betrayal was now fully exposed, undeniable and undeniable to anyone who cared to see. For me, Caleb, the moment after the confrontation was about taking back control, not in anger, but in clarity. I had faced the truth, and now it was time to live by it. The first thing I did was set boundaries firm, unwavering. Madison had made her choice. Now it was my responsibility to protect my own heart. I let her know, calmly and firmly, that our relationship was over. There was no debate, no negotiation. The days of manipulation, secrecy, and betrayal were behind me. It was a decision made not out of spite, but out of self-respect. You need to understand, I told her, looking straight into her eyes, this isn't about revenge. It's about accepting reality and reclaiming the life I'm meant to live without deception. Her eyes filled with tears, a mixture of guilt and helplessness. She tried to speak, to explain, but I shook my head gently. There was nothing left to explain. The evidence, the confrontation, the emotional weight of weeks of heartbreak, all of it had spoken louder than words ever could. After the confrontation, I began to consider the broader impact of Madison's choices. Mutual friends, once caught in the middle, now had clarity. Some were supportive, offering comfort and understanding. Others expressed their own disappointment in her duplicity. Witnessing this, I realized that justice wasn't just personal, it was social, moral, and emotional. Her actions had consequences that rippled beyond just the two of us, and I couldn't ignore that. I also took steps to protect myself from further emotional harm. Social media connections were muted, messages blocked, and personal boundaries reinforced. I needed space, distance, and time to heal. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about self-preservation. I refused to allow her continued presence, even virtually, to undermine my recovery. As the days passed, I noticed subtle shifts in her behavior. Madison realized, slowly and painfully, that her choices had consequences. The social circle she had taken for granted began to distance themselves. Invitations she assumed were automatic were now withheld. Friends who had previously excused her behavior now recognized the betrayal, and the truth she had so carefully hidden began to define her in their eyes. Witnessing this from afar was not satisfying in a petty sense, but it confirmed one essential truth: actions have consequences. The life Madison had tried to live without accountability was no longer possible. Justice, in its quietest and most inevitable form, had arrived. Meanwhile, I focused on myself. I reconnected with hobbies and passions that had been sidelined, poured energy into work and personal projects, and allowed myself to grieve fully. Healing wasn't linear, and I experienced moments of sadness, nostalgia, and longing. But every moment of reflection reinforced the understanding that I had made the right choice to confront, to assert boundaries, and to reclaim my life. I also began to lean on those who had remained steadfast. Close friends and family who understood the truth became a support system, offering perspective and emotional reinforcement. Their presence reminded me that trust, loyalty, and honesty were still alive in the world, and that the betrayal I endured was not a reflection of my worth. The legal or moral accountability, whichever lens you view it through, had been established. Madison's duplicity was no longer hidden. The confrontation had laid bare the full scope of her choices. My decision to walk away was not weakness. It was strength. The justice in this situation was not violent or dramatic. It was measured, inevitable, and grounded in truth. I spent time reflecting on the lessons this episode had taught me. Trust is fragile. Love is not enough when honesty is absent. And self-respect is non-negotiable. The betrayal, as painful as it had been, became a catalyst for growth, self-awareness, and emotional resilience. It forced me to examine not only Madison's actions, but my own willingness to tolerate deception. By the end of the week, I began to feel a sense of liberation. The confrontation, evidence, and clear boundaries had transformed my helplessness into empowerment. I could move forward without carrying the weight of uncertainty, deception, or emotional manipulation. This period of justice was not about revenge or humiliation. It was about the restoration of my own agency. The betrayal I experienced could not define me. Instead, it became a framework for understanding my limits, asserting my values, and cultivating the clarity I had long been denied. Madison, on the other hand, had to navigate the consequences of her choices. Friends questioned her integrity. Emotional trust from those she had taken for granted eroded. She was forced to confront the reality that actions have consequences, and that the life she had tried to construct in secrecy could not remain untouched. For me, justice was internal as much as it was external. It was the decision to reclaim my own narrative, to assert boundaries, to refuse further deception, and to face the truth directly. There was no cathartic explosion, no dramatic confrontation with others. The victory was quiet, personal, and resolute. I took the following weeks to focus on myself entirely. I reconnected with old friends, explored new opportunities, and allowed myself to feel fully, honestly, and without restraint. The grief of betrayal gradually gave way to clarity, and the space created by separation allowed me to breathe again. In the midst of this process, I realized that the most powerful form of justice wasn't punishment for her, it was freedom for me. The freedom to love authentically, to trust wisely, and to rebuild life with honesty and intention. That realization, simple as it seemed, became the foundation of my emotional recovery. By the end of that month, I felt stronger than I had in weeks. I no longer carried the weight of deception, the uncertainty, or the helplessness that had once defined this chapter of my life. Justice had been served in its purest form, truth revealed, boundaries established, and self-respect reclaimed. For Madison, the consequences were evident in her isolation, her acknowledgement of choices made, and the ripple effects of broken trust. For me, the resolution was more internal, yet no less profound. It was the affirmation that honesty, clarity, and courage could prevail over betrayal, even when love and trust had been shattered. The confrontation and resolution had taken their toll, leaving a quiet, heavy stillness in the days that followed. The initial adrenaline, the tension, the need to act, all of that had dissipated, leaving behind a raw, aching clarity. I had faced the truth, asserted my boundaries, and seen Madison's choices exposed. But the emotional cleanup, the real aftermath, was only beginning. For the first few days, I walked through life almost on autopilot. The apartment felt empty, the silence deafening. Memories of shared laughter, quiet nights, and intimate conversations haunted every corner. Even small triggers, a familiar song, a passing scent, a photograph tugged at my chest. Each reminder was both a wound and a lesson, a bittersweet marker of what had been and what could never be again. Friends reached out, offering comfort and perspective. Their voices became lifelines in the storm. Some had been aware, some hadn't, but all offered empathy, grounding me in a reality beyond my immediate heartbreak. I realized how essential it was to lean on these connections, to acknowledge that processing betrayal was not meant to be done in isolation. I began to journal, trying to capture the whirlwind of emotions that had overtaken me. Writing was a form of therapy, a way to externalize the chaos of hurt, anger, confusion, and fleeting moments of nostalgia. Each page became a testament not just to the pain Madison had caused, but to the resilience I was cultivating in response. Sleep was uneasy at first. Dreams of what once was and what could have been invaded my nights. Yet, gradually, rest returned. I began to wake without the immediate ache of dread, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. The heaviness was still there, yes, but it no longer controlled me. In the weeks that followed, I deliberately filled the space left by Madison's absence with self-focused endeavors. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned, reconnected with old passions, and explored opportunities I had neglected while entangled in a relationship that was never fully reciprocal. Each step forward was an act of reclamation, a way to reassert my identity outside of her shadow. I also confronted a truth I had long avoided. The betrayal wasn't just hers to bear. It was mine to process. I had ignored subtle warning signs, rationalized inconsistencies, and hoped against hope that love alone could bridge the gaps she had built. Acknowledging my own role in allowing deception to flourish didn't diminish her betrayal, it merely gave me a clearer lens through which to understand the full story. Socially, the aftermath was just as significant. Mutual friends navigated a complex landscape, reassessing loyalties and reevaluating trust. Some remained supportive, others distanced themselves, either out of discomfort or disapproval of Madison's actions. Observing this reminded me that betrayal extends beyond the direct relationship, it ripples outward, touching those connected to the lives involved. I found unexpected solace in small victories, completing a challenging project at work, reconnecting with friends I had neglected. Even walking through the city streets without the weight of secrecy pressing down each moment was a quiet affirmation of resilience. Madison's choices had disrupted my life, yes, but they had also inadvertently forced me to rediscover strength I hadn't fully acknowledged. At night, I often reflected on trust and love and the precarious balance between vulnerability and self-protection. The aftermath wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about understanding limits, acknowledging pain, and building a foundation of self-respect that could endure future trials. I realized that the most important lesson was not simply about recognizing betrayal, but about reclaiming agency in the face of it. There were moments of temptation, brief flashes of longing for the comfort and familiarity Madison once provided, but those moments passed more quickly as I reminded myself of the reality I had confronted: the lies, the duplicity, the undeniable evidence of choices made without regard for my heart. The longing became tempered by clarity, nostalgia replaced by understanding. Family support became increasingly significant. My parents and siblings offered counsel, not just about Madison, but about life, values, and emotional resilience. Their insights were invaluable, helping me to place the betrayal in context while reinforcing the importance of self-worth and boundaries. In professional spaces, I noticed subtle changes as well. Confidence returned, interactions became more assertive, and previously daunting tasks felt manageable. The emotional clarity I had gained in my personal life began to manifest in other areas, proving that confronting the aftermath was not only about healing the heart but also about strengthening the mind. By the end of the month, I could move through daily life without the immediate sting of betrayal searing through every thought. The grief and shock had not disappeared entirely, but they no longer dictated my choices. Madison's actions had consequences, yes, but they did not define me. I was reclaiming my narrative, step by step, moment by moment. There were still difficult nights, moments of reflection where I pondered the what-ifs and the dreams we once shared. But those thoughts were no longer debilitating. They were instructive. They served as reminders of the importance of honesty, loyalty, and the hard-earned wisdom that comes from navigating heartbreak. I also began to consider the future differently. The aftermath had forced me to recognize what I wanted in relationships, friendships, and life. Trust would not be given lightly. Honesty would not be negotiable. And most importantly, my own well-being would never again be contingent on someone else's deception. The months that followed were a testament to resilience. I rebuilt routines, pursued personal growth, and gradually restored a sense of normalcy that betrayal had once threatened to destroy. The aftermath, painful and disorienting at first, became a crucible in which strength, clarity, and self-respect were forged. Looking back on those weeks and months, I realized that the real gift of this aftermath was understanding of myself, of boundaries, and of the value of emotional truth. Madison's actions had forced me to confront betrayal fully, and in doing so, I had discovered an inner strength I hadn't known existed. By the time the dust settled, I felt lighter, more grounded, and ready to move forward. Life had been disrupted, trust had been fractured, but the process of rebuilding taught me that healing is not just about recovery, it's about growth, self-awareness, and the courage to face the world honestly, even after profound heartbreak. The aftermath was not a period of despair. It was a period of awakening. And while Madison's choices would always be part of my story, they no longer controlled it. I had survived, learned, and reclaimed my narrative stronger, wiser, and more certain of the person I was becoming. Months had passed since Madison's betrayal, since the confrontation, the resolution, and the painstaking aftermath. Life had gradually returned to a rhythm that felt familiar, yet nothing would ever be the same. I had learned that some truths, once uncovered, leave permanent marks, but they also teach lessons that cannot be gained any other way. I walked through my favorite park one crisp morning, the sun casting long shadows across the paths. The air smelled of early autumn, faintly of fallen leaves and damp earth. For the first time in weeks, I felt a profound sense of calm. The chaos, heartbreak, and betrayal had shaped me, yes, but they had not broken me. I was whole again, not because the pain had vanished, but because I had faced it fully and emerged stronger. I reflected on the sequence of events, on the helplessness I had felt, and on the courage it had taken to confront the truth. It wasn't just about Madison or her choices. It was about me, about reclaiming agency in a world that had momentarily been tilted by deceit. The confrontation had been painful, the aftermath disorienting, but every step had taught me something invaluable: that self-respect is earned, that honesty is a cornerstone of any meaningful relationship, and that love cannot flourish in the shadow of betrayal. As I passed the bench where I used to sit with Madison, memories surfaced: the laughter, the quiet talks late at night, the dreams we had woven together. For a moment, I allowed myself to remember without anger, without despair. I let the nostalgia wash over me, acknowledging the joy that had existed, even as I knew it had been intertwined with deception. It was a bittersweet recognition, a reminder that life is rarely simple, and that love, even when flawed, teaches us resilience. I also thought about Madison. She had been a teacher in an unexpected sense. Her choices, her secrecy, her duplicity, had forced me to confront not only her truth but my own. I realized that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who show us the hardest lessons, often in ways that are painful, sometimes devastating. The betrayal had been raw, but it had illuminated my own values, boundaries, and strength in a way nothing else could. The months of rebuilding had taught me patience. Patience with myself, with my emotions, and with the process of recovery. I had allowed myself to grieve, to feel anger, to question, and to ultimately understand that healing is not linear. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, but each one was temporary, a stepping stone toward clarity and inner peace. Friends and family remained an essential part of my journey. Their support, unwavering in its quiet strength, reminded me that trust can still exist, that relationships can be grounded in honesty and care. These connections reinforced a crucial truth: while betrayal can hurt deeply, it cannot erase the bonds forged in genuine love and loyalty. Professionally and personally, I began to thrive again. Tasks that had once seemed daunting became manageable. Decisions were made with confidence, relationships nurtured with authenticity. The experience had reshaped my perspective, teaching me to value truth, to question carefully, and to prioritize self-worth above all else. I had regained control over my life, not by erasing the past, but by embracing it and learning from it. In moments of quiet reflection, I understood that the story of Madison and me was not just a story of heartbreak, it was a story of awakening. The betrayal had forced me to confront the fragility of trust, the necessity of boundaries, and the importance of self-respect. It had taught me that love, while powerful, cannot compensate for deceit, and that true resilience emerges from facing uncomfortable truths head-on. Looking back, I no longer felt anger toward her, not because the betrayal had been excused, but because I had chosen to reclaim my narrative, to step out of the shadow of deception, and to define my life on my own terms. Forgiveness, in this sense, was not about absolving her. It was about freeing myself from the chains of bitterness and resentment. I reflected on the idea of love itself. Real love, I realized, is built on transparency, respect, and trust. Without those pillars, affection becomes hollow, intimacy becomes fragile, and bonds are easily shattered. The experience had been a harsh reminder, but it was also a guide, a compass pointing toward what mattered most in relationships and in life. Even as the memories surfaced, the small gestures, the moments of intimacy, the shared dreams, I could now observe them with a sense of detachment, clarity, and understanding. They were chapters in my story, neither wholly good nor wholly bad, but essential for shaping who I had become. I was no longer the same person who had blindly trusted, who had hoped against hope, who had been caught off guard by betrayal. Months later, I met someone new, someone who valued honesty, who respected boundaries, and who approached connection with care. The lessons from Madison's deception were not forgotten. They were applied. The experience had taught me discernment, patience, and the importance of emotional integrity. This new relationship, healthier and more authentic, was proof that growth often emerges from pain, and that heartbreak can lay the foundation for true understanding. I also reflected on myself, on the strength I had discovered, the courage I had summoned, and the clarity I had fought to achieve. The journey had not been easy. It had tested every part of me, but the result was a deeper awareness, a renewed sense of purpose, and an unshakable belief in my worth. In the quiet evenings, I often revisited the lessons learned: to trust wisely, to set boundaries firmly, to value honesty above all, and to recognize that self-respect is not negotiable. Life, with all its complexities and betrayals, had taught me to navigate relationships with a balance of heart and mind, empathy and discernment. Ultimately, I realized that Madison's actions, while painful, had catalyzed a transformation I could not have anticipated. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more attuned to my own needs and values. I understood that betrayal, while devastating, can serve as a powerful teacher, forcing us to confront reality, redefine trust, and reclaim control over our lives. As the sun set, casting warm golden hues across the city, I felt a profound sense of closure. Not the closure born of forgetting or excusing, but the closure that comes from understanding, from reclaiming one's narrative, and from stepping forward into life with dignity and clarity. The chapter with Madison had ended, but the story of my life, honest, deliberate, and self-empowered, was only beginning, and in that moment, I knew I had survived, I had grown, and I was finally free to love, trust, and live on my own terms. If you find this story good, please like and subscribe our channel. It's free for you, but helps us a lot to keep sharing real stories like this.